Hi guys, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm pleased to be joined by Courtney Mitchell, and it's so funny. There's no way that you can know this. We're starting our interview so late because we've had such a great time chatting and catching up. So pleased to meet you, Courtney. And I'm so happy you could join us today.
Thank you, Sue. We truly have already lived a lifetime before we've even started this interview.
I know, and I have a
Talking.
feeling that that was probably the first of many conversations to come.
Agree.
So, anytime that I have someone on, I always ask people to tell us a little bit about their military spouse career journey, up until now, just so that it kind of level sets the conversation for everybody so they know where you're coming from.
Sure. Well, I'll give some background because as many of you, I'm sure, my whole career journey has been anything but linear. I always think it's really interesting that we ask an 18-year-old, what they want to be for the rest of their life when you go to college, knowing that unless that track is something very finite, like a doctor or something, you usually take a really long time to land on your purpose, right? And then you throw in active duty and other components, and that really makes that road even more swivelly. So I actually studied psychology in school and began my career as a social worker for the state of Georgia. So, actually, on the child maltreatment side, which is very intense. Um, and then decided I was too big of a personality for Northern Georgia and got into the New York City Teaching Fellow program, which, for those who are not familiar with that, it's basically New York City specific Teach for America, and they bring in people, many whom already live in this city but want to transition into education. And you actually get a master's through that program. So I got a master's in special education while I was teaching special ed high school in Brooklyn. I have stories if anybody would like to know them. And then I moved to Center City, Philadelphia. All of this relevant in the end, because that is when I married my husband, who was in grad school at the time. He was sent to grad school for the Army. And from there, I actually met the prior executive director of an organization many will know, Travis Manion Foundation. That was 2011. So at that time, Travis Manion Foundation had just transitioned from being a family foundation to a full-scale programmatic nonprofit. And I went back to school because I had worked with several education nonprofits while I was in New York City, but pro bono, things that I wanted to get involved with or help my students with separately, and learned that I was pretty good at bringing people together and moving these missions forward. And so while my husband was in school, was like, why not? Let's change careers. So I went back to school, got a nonprofit management certificate from UPenn, switched over with a concentration in development, specifically for nonprofit development, and then was hired on as the assistant director of development at the Travis Manion Foundation. And there I stayed for 12 years. So that's very rare. And a lot of military spouses are not afforded that opportunity. But during that time, we moved 6 times. We PCS 6 times. I had 3 children, a couple dogs, a lot of TDY, an individual deployment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, of things to deal with during that time. And although I no longer work there, Travis Manning Foundation is a phenomenal organization, and they afforded me the flexibility when I needed it at those times of PCS, permanent changes of station, and when my husband was not around or was deployed, that there was some flexibility there. So I was able to, I didn't have a break in employment, but there are a whole slew of different stressors that come with not having a break in deployment and feeling like you got to keep all the plates spinning. And so a couple years ago, I really felt we were deciding about whether or not we were going to transition out of the Army. after a full career and what we would do. And it really just came to a head that I wanted to be more in control of my time. I wanted to be more in control of how I was using my passions and expertise and everything that I had done through my previous experiences in the many years of experience before that. And so I became a consultant. I started my own business, and that I've been doing for, well, formally for 18 months, but informally a little longer than that. And at the same time, a colleague of mine at the time, who's now my partner in crime, we started a podcast. We felt it was really necessary to talk about the things people don't talk about externally. You know, we have all these publications. We have our, well, the Army calls them FRGs, for family support, SFRG. And you know, everyone has their own support systems through these their service members and other things in their units. But no one was really talking about all of the transition periods. You felt like you were in constant transition from something always. I mean, whether it was with your kids, with your family, where you live. And so we started a podcast called Gather at Gray at the same time that I was transitioning out of that role I'd been in for 12 years. And that is where we are today. So since then, we have continued that same podcast. I have continued the consultancy until today. And we did end up transitioning out of the military just almost 60 days ago. So we're fresh faces.
Crazy, and you still look sane, so that's insane. So I think our career trajectories kind of parallel each other a little bit, in that I was also working for a military focused nonprofit. And I loved my job and you loved
Mhm.
your job.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so it's one thing to leave a job when you hate your job,
Right.
but it's another thing altogether when you're like, I love the mission, I love the organization. And I mean, you kind of alluded to it a little bit, but I wonder if you could speak a little bit more about what made you take the leap and start your own consulting business, especially when you know that you are leaving an organization that you really respect
Right.
and like.
Well, quite frankly, when I went into the organization, you know, as many have said before me, I had no intention of being there for 12 years. But it did become a family, and you know, I was lucky to be integral in the leadership of the organization and how I could support its growth. And I became very close with everyone there. But there did come a point in time where I knew that I needed to finally make decisions on behalf of my family. My husband and I needed to make decisions on behalf of our family. I had every intention of staying in that position until my husband transitioned out, which is another thing we can talk about, because I do think we often stay in places longer or shorter, depending on, you know, depending on what's happening with our service members, right?
Right.
We may stay there longer because who's going to hire me if I leave, or we may leave too early because what if they don't support me when I'm in a different location? And I know that that does not, if you are a licensed individual, if you are a teacher, you know, a nurse, and you have to get relicensure, that's a different scenario in each state. But for those of us who are not, and our job could transfer, you know, it's something to think about. But and that was the case for me. I thought I would be there until we transitioned out and could and felt like we were stable and, you know, could make those decisions together. But I had a real longing to, I'm very entrepreneurial at heart. I always need to be moving and shaking and have my brain on new projects. I love that. I love solving those types of problems. And so that was part of it too, is I wanted a new problem set, right? I wanted a new challenge. And if I may be so bold, I wanted something external to the military. I had worked so long in the VSO space and lived in the active duty component that I needed some separation for my peace. It wasn't getting any calmer, right? To do both of those things and to juggle all of the entities that happen within those environments. And I also knew that I was coming to the understanding that I needed to have at least half a step outside of being what felt like fully encompassed in a military conversation every day.
That's a really great segue because the other thing I was curious about is how did you prepare yourself both financially and mentally? And that seems like it speaks to the mental part, but how about the other part, the financial part?
Well, I actually don't know that you could fully mentally prepare because it is still terrifying. I want to say that, people think that I just jumped off the diving board and then had swimming success, immediately. But it's terrifying when you go from to what you've already said, Sue, an organization that you love and respect, that you have longevity with, that you have security with, right? And you're now the sole individual who can provide that. That is absolutely terrifying. And I'm a pretty gritty person. And so it was actually really surprising to me that it was scary because I was like, I can do this. And then when it happened, I was like, uh-oh, what did I do? But financially, we we are not, I'm going to say this. We've always been dual income because I kept my job.
Right.
And so with that, were able to prep a little bit more, and and not only that, but I thankfully was able to secure a client pretty quickly. So my husband was very supportive. I mean, he was a little surprised when I was like, "Here we go." But he was also very supportive. And so with that, I think it took some of the angst away from, well, what if? Well, what if we do nothing? And we did set a time limit. It was like, well, okay, so if I have no income in 6 months, what do we do? And I think that's part of the plan process. If you are going to do that, ha having the support around you that allows you to have a little bit of a safety net where you can say, okay, I'm going to start that runway and in 180 days, evaluate where I am and where I need to go.
No, that's smart. And I think that's really important. I think the best thing that I ever did when I was trying to make the transition from a full-time job to my own consulting business was I hired a financial planner who was also a
Hmm.
business coach. And so we figured out that I needed a longer runway than just quitting my job and giving 2 weeks notice. He's like, you
Right.
need like 18 more months to brand yourself and to do some more writing and to do some more speaking. And then that's when I wrote the book and all this other stuff. And so
Hmm.
I don't think that anybody at that point in time ever talked to military spouses in that manner, in which they didn't talk about runway, they didn't talk about an
Yeah.
off ramp. So I think it's so fascinating that there are so many military spouses now, which is why we're doing these conversations. There's so many military spouses now who are on the other side of it, who've done it. And
Right.
I mean, I think I would love to know from you is what tips would you give other military spouses who are considering entrepreneurship? Like, what were your lessons learned and things you would have done differently?
I'm still learning them, first of all. So I'll give I'll give you that where I am now. I part of the fear was the VSO MSO world is a very tight-knit community. And everyone knows so many of the same people and you're in the same room and having the same conversations, that some of my fear was, what happens when I leave this? What happens when I willingly step away from my big title, my big position, and being in these rooms all the time? Will people talk to me? Will they shun me? And so what I did was I just started having conversations with my network and saying, this is my vision. This is what I would like to do. Some were already consultants, some were considering it, some were using them, some were funders, some were, it was a very diverse array of individuals that I said I just would like to give you my perspective and I would like your opinion on this. And so that was step one is doing the research, like bringing your network in. If you're able to do that, I know you're not always able to bring all the people in to the conversation that you want to, especially if it's happening while you're still employed. But I started having those conversations and I was met with excitement. I was met with people being super supportive and really willing to introduce me to other people or bring me into other conversations. And the longer I've done this, the more I realize that that's really the nature of how good networks work, right? And and I think people don't understand how robust their network is, quite honestly. How many people they know, how many conversations and connections they have, and how willing people are to connect and make that connection. So that's something that I always I love to mentor other women on where they are and where they want to go. It's something I've done my entire career, not just in where I am. It's part of my personal mission. And I always say that I'm like, look who's around you, even who your best friends are and the industries that they work in, and talk to them. Listen, see who they know, who they can connect you with. So that was a huge one. The other thing we've already touched on it is actually planning. You have to take the time to sit and mull over what it is you're bringing to the table, what it is you want to do, and what success looks like specifically in year one and then longitudinally, because year one is always the build year. You know, you're building a website from scratch if you need it. You're building your brand, what your business is, what you're doing, and how you're conveying that externally. And that is has to be that's like a muscle, right? It has to be exercised. And the more you do it, the more comfortable and the more clarity it brings for you on how what you need to do moving forward. So definitely plan, definitely set up more meetings than you think you need in all different facets of your network, and sit in not just a vision but actually sketching out a plan for yourself.
No, I think that's 100% correct. And I think not to plan is to plan to fail, right? What is that saying? I always massacre those sayings, but that seems right. And you're absolutely right because it also gave me, I think the thing that people forget about the planning is put financial goals next to it too.
Yes, yeah.
Where you gave yourself 6 months, I gave myself 5 years. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna take my time. But no, I think that's really, really smart where but I think it's also helping to manage expectations between you and your spouse to where they now understand that you're not saying, I just need you to be my sugar daddy or sugar mommy or whatever. Like, I just need you to float my little harebrained
Yeah.
idea. No, that's how you differentiate from being a harebrained idea to an actual career path, which is I have a plan. I have financial goals. This is what I want to do. This is my competitive advantage. Yes. And did you go to IVMF? Did you do that?
Yes. So thank you for bringing that up. So I was, I'm a huge advocate for all of the resources that are provided to military spouses, the, veterans transitioning, all of it. But I quite honestly had never engaged with one. I knew of hundreds of them and I was happy to connect people to do it, but I had never personally done one. So I did IVMF's VWise program in Jacksonville. Funny enough, I showed up and a prior board member of mine was there and other people that I knew. And it's a phenomenal program. It does take some work. It takes time to do it, but it is one of the things that I did. And they provide incredible resources on the back end and other things that really helped me. They, help you build a business plan if you haven't done that yet. There's other resources, and even just going and being surrounded by that many people who are thinking about what their moment is and what they want to do is really empowering because you're not the only one,
Exactly.
and everyone's at a different place in their journey of starting that entrepreneurial journey or whatever their business is. And that was helpful as well. So I did do VWise, highly recommend. IVMF has some incredible programs. But more than anything, use the resources.
Yeah.
I don't know why I was hesitant to do it when I tell everyone else to do it and they're incredible. But I did, and it was a wonderful experience.
I think it's because as military spouses, we never want to feel like we're taking resources away from someone who may need it more.
True.
So it's good.
Totally true.
So I I know we've been talking for a while, but I don't want to close without you're here and you're going through the transition right now. It would be terrible of me to not ask you, how's it going? And like, do you have any lessons learned or do you have any tips for us?
Um, we're baby transitioned. So my my husband just transitioned out of the army May 1st. Now it was a pretty longitudinal transition, so we had a longer runway than many, but I I don't I will give you these few things on preparation for those who are seeing it in the near future or who are getting ready to walk through it. For the spouse and the family, for my experience, my entire marriage and my kids' entire existence was within the active duty structure. And so I was very excited to be like, oh, what is it like, not doing this or what in the real world? This looks fun. But I wasn't prepared for the emotional journey that I was going to go on of not being associated with a military post, not being associated with a unit specifically, being external to that. That was not really something anyone spoke to me about. It was just, yay, you're getting out, you made it. And everything was a celebration, which is fantastic. And I love that for everyone. But prepare how it's going, how you need to respond to it. And it isn't something that you're going to know until you're walking through some of the steps, but I have been a lot more vocal recently about how emotional I was and what an emotional toll that was for me in that transition. And I'm sure some of it has to do with feeling like a little bit of our identity of the prior many years is gone. And what do we do now and who are we now? And that might not be able to be something that you can define until you're in it. And then the other, the other thing which is funny is I always say, "Who moved my cheese?" It's like the transition when your person comes back from a deployment or a long TDY, and it takes a really long time
Mhm.
to. I'll tell a quick story, which is really indicative of this. Um, the first few weeks that my husband was home and my kids would wake up in the morning to go to school and dad was there drinking his coffee, especially my youngest, he walked right up to him and he goes, why are you here?" And I was like,
So,
"Oh, buddy." But for him, it was so abnormal that his dad was sitting
like,
there in
what's
the
going on?
morning.
What's wrong in the world?
What's
Why?
wrong? What's happening? Why are you home? And so there is that huge transition period we're still in the middle of just getting the acclimation of getting used to being a full family all the time. All the time. My husband doesn't yet have a new job, or maybe he won't, but um that has been really interesting to watch. It's also been beautiful. It's been beautiful to watch. So, letting your kids have a blast and reacclimate to dad being around all the time. But just one more additional thing on the transition side. Um, I would have planned more. Again, I'm going back to I sound like I'm this incredible planner. I'm not. I am a little bit of fly by the seat of your pants kind of person. And I'm learning in my older age to maybe pull that back a little bit and think about it a little more deeply. But I don't know that I planned enough for myself overall
Because
with
you
it.
never had to, because like
Oh,
it's almost
yes.
like to survive as a military spouse is to not plan so that you have no expectation.
Be flexible. Yes.
Emperor Gumby. And now it's like, hey, you can plan. And I think that's part of the transition. That's the fun part is like, you can plan now, Courtney. I am officially giving you permission. You can plan.
Thank you. I planted a garden for the first time in forever.
Well, then you can eat your $600 salad when those two tomatoes
Exactly.
come.
It was a lot of money. I was like, why am I doing this? This is not.
I at this point I have like an eggplant plant and it's we have a whole bunch of eggplants to harvest and even with the whole harvest it's not even enough for a recipe, but I feel like I planted a garden.
Yes. Yeah.
No,
It
but
only
this is
cost me
wonderful.
$300.
This is wonderful, and I could continue this forever, and I hope we do continue the conversation. But if you guys have more questions for Courtney, I hope you'll put them in the comments, and we will make sure we get them to Courtney, and I'm sure she will answer them after the fact. But thanks so much for spending some time with me today. I really enjoyed chatting with you.
Thank you, Sue. It's been great.
I know, and I hope to chat with you again soon. And thank you to our friends at USAA for making these conversations possible. And if you have a great story to tell, I hope you will let us know because you never know who you will inspire. But other than that, I will see you guys here again next week. Bye, guys.
Bye.